Okay. good evening, ladies and gentlemen, Rochester, Monroe County region. My name is Willie Lightfoot, president of United Professional Barbers and Cosmetologists Association. We are here this evening, joined with members of the U.P.B.C.A board, Vice President Wade Davis, as well as Johnny Scott. And we have a very special guest with us this evening. We're bringing our shop talk with U.P.B.C.A with you this month. And our guest speaker and presenter this evening is none other than Aqua Porter, the executive director of RMAPI. We're so happy to have you with us this evening, Aqua, and we want to give you space. We hear a lot of conversations, especially with the pandemic and after the pandemic and before the pandemic, about RMAPI and the efforts that have been held concerning poverty in our city. And we oftentimes, I know I hear it in my barbershop, and I know Wade and Johnny may hear it in their shop, where we often hear people quote, "Oh, Rochester's the worst place for Black people to live, and we're high in poverty," and all of these other kind of things. And we're those of us who are born and raised in this city. We love this city. We know that my father used to say, if you can't make it in Rochester, you can't make it anywhere. And so we know that this city is full of resources, full of opportunity, and many of us have done a good job of raising ourselves, our families, and have been very successful in running businesses and et cetera. And so with that being said, we as barbers and beauticians in the appearance enhancement industry, we thought about first of all, what's going on in the space of RMAPI. And we want to give you an opportunity to explain to us and to our viewers and those who will be watching this, what's going on in that space. And then hopefully we can have dialogue and a conversation about how can we partner and help get information out to our community. So at this time, I'll turn it over to you, Aqua.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for the invitation and for the opportunity to talk to the U.P.B.C.A, which I had not had a lot of familiarity with. And so it's such an important organization. The work that you all do to keep us all beautiful and our appearances enhanced is so much of kind of, it is a part of who we are. Like, I always say when my hair's done and my toes and my nails are polished, I always feel beautiful, even on the outside, sometimes if I'm struggling on the inside. So I know that the work that you all do for our community, both from the appearances standpoint and from just being a part of our community and being successful business people, is a role model. And so thank you very much for the invitation to address you tonight. And I would just like to say that I want this to be a conversation and a dialogue. I don't come with all the answers. In some cases, I probably come with just as many questions as you have. While I'm not a born and raised resident of Rochester, I've been in Rochester for more than 35 years. So I feel like I'm a native, and I certainly understand and agree that we have a lot of assets in Rochester. There is a lot of wealth. There are a lot of resources, but there is a lot of disparity in who gets them. And so how we go about trying to allocate resources and assets more equally, intentionally, I think is a question that RMAPI, really at the heart of it is grappling with. So I do have a short presentation that I thought we'd start with, and then I would love to open it up to dialogue. I have questions to ask you all, and I'm sure you might have questions to ask me, so we will just get at it. How's that? Okay. So I am the executive director of the Rochester Monroe Anti-Poverty Initiative, and I have been the executive director officially since December of 2020. I served as the interim executive director from May of 2020, and then it was hired in December of 2020 after a pretty significant search. My understanding was there was probably 140 candidates that they initially kind of looked through. And the process was, I say that because I think the process was really well done and very thorough. So I'm, happy to be selected. Definitely was not on my bingo card for the COVID year, but I just really fell in love with the work and was subsequently really happy to be hired as executive director. So let's see here. Okay, let's see if we can get started. So who is RMAPI? I think that's a really good place to start and to really kind of start the dialogue with who RMAPI is and what RMAPI is and what it isn't. And so at the heart of it, RMAPI is a collection of organizations who are working together in new ways to tackle systemic root causes that contribute to poverty. We are a coalition of the willing. It is not a 501c3. It is not a nonprofit. We are not a service provider. We are not a funder. We are basically a group of individuals and organizations in Monroe County and Rochester who agree that together we think we can tackle some of the real systemic causes of poverty, while others who are better resourced can tackle the everyday issues that people are dealing with and trying to make sure that people get the services that they need. We're looking more long-term to see what we can do to eliminate poverty at its root, and supporting those who are doing everything to support people who might be struggling or living with some of the, the root causes of poverty today. So we only are successful if the stakeholders that are around the table are really committed and aligned to the goals and the strategies. And so that's why we say we're a coalition of the willing. So we include human service organizations, not-for-profits, philanthropies, public and private companies. There's elected officials from the city, from the county, from the state. We have faith leaders, community members, and others. And most of our work is focused on looking at trying to increase the self-sufficiency of individuals and families through sustainable employment and living wages so that they can have greater access and affordability of basic needs like housing, transportation, childcare, food, and broadband internet. We are trying to change systems at the root cause of, at the root of what we do. And some people sometimes think that we are a service provider, so they expect for us to be able to provide services or provide money, and we don't have those resources. I mean, a lot of people around our table do, but as kind of an entity, we don't do that work. But what we're trying to do is figure out how do we go and tackle the big, long-standing, entrenched, systemic causes of poverty, which could look like racism. It could look like bad policies. It could look like, mistreatment of people for long periods of time. And so we are the misallocation of resources. And so we are trying to really get at the root causes and try to see if we can tackle those things kind of once and for all. We have a few guiding principles. One is that we try to address the root causes of poverty. Two, we try to create conditions to reduce poverty in Rochester and Monroe County. We're trying to change mindsets and also change practices and foster neighborhood healing. And our underlying goal is that the community informs the work and the priorities of RMAPI and serve as a guide for our decision making. And so it's incredibly important that we have community at the table every step of the way, and that they are members who have lived or are living with poverty, and that they feel like they have voice and power to speak on their own behalf and on behalf of those in their community, and that they can see that their voices are making a difference in how we do the work that we do and where we, put our energy. So I don't know how much of this information people know, but I thought I would just show some of this information just so we could kind of all be grounded. Willie, you talked about kind of, this idea of what does poverty look like in Rochester. We know that the poverty rates really vary widely in Monroe County, from over 60% in some Rochester neighborhoods to less than 8% outside of Rochester. And inside of Rochester, the poverty rate is about 33%. So that's about 67,000 individuals versus about 8% for Monroe County. We also know that in Rochester, in Monroe County, that the poverty rate for African Americans and the poverty rate for Latinos outpaces both the New York State numbers rates as well as the rates in the rest of the country. So there is something really significant happening within the Monroe County, kind of 9-county region that's different than the rest of New York State and different than the rest of the country. And that's a little worrisome and disappointing, because we know that we should be able to do better. We would want to at least be, we wouldn't want to be worse than New York State and worse than the country. And so something is uniquely happening, we believe, in the Rochester region that we need to really get underneath and understand. We also know that in addition to just the poverty rates, there's some extraordinary disparity in Monroe County between our white residents and our African American and Latino residents. And so all of these things together, these factors, we think start to commingle with some of the things that kind of represents poverty. So if you look at the 8th grade proficiency ELA, you'll see that for our white residents in Monroe County, there's about a 48% proficiency, but for African Americans, it's a 17% proficiency and 20% for our Latino residents. The graduation rate for white residents, white students, is about 91%, whereas for African American and Latino, it's in the mid-70s. The unemployment rate, and this was pre-COVID, was 4.4% for white residents and 14% for African American and 11% for Latino residents. The poverty rate, which I just showed you, 10% for white residents, 32% for Black and Latino. And then we go to things like median income, which we know kind of represents poverty. And you'll see that the median income for our white residents is about $61,000, whereas for African American and Latino, the median income is $30,000, $32,000 for Latino. And then home ownership, which is another way to start to generate wealth, create intergenerational wealth, be able to pass on to our families generational wealth. 73% home ownership rate with an average home ownership value of $131,000 for white residents in Monroe County. And when you look at African American and Latino residents, 32% home ownership rate, and where they do own homes, the average home value is $77,000, $89,000 for Latino. So we know that poverty is one metric, but the disparities in Monroe County, especially when you disaggregate it and look at it according to race, just are glaring and indicate that there is something that's going on that we really do need to address. So, a report that was released last August called the Hard Facts Report kind of summarized what was going on in Monroe County in this way. It said that the disparities impact individual and families throughout their lives and even into future generations, and wide gaps exist in all measures. The gaps between racial and ethnic groups are greater in the Rochester region than in the United States or New York State as a whole. And racial and ethnic inequalities reflect societal injustice, and that injustice is stronger in the Rochester region than in the nation as a whole or New York State as a whole. And these results then have a demonstrable impact on the well-being of the Rochester region. So if we're not able to fix some of these underlying disparities and these gaps, then our region as a whole is going to struggle. Whether it's an, we're still only going to be as strong as our weakest link as an economy and as a region. And so it is really incumbent upon our region to get our entire everybody more healthy, financially healthy, emotionally healthy, economically healthy. Like all of those things are important, and you'll educationally healthy. All of those things will strengthen ourselves as an economy and as a region. We know also that poverty impacts the health of individuals and our overall community, and that people in poor neighborhoods die 8 years earlier than people in affluent neighborhoods. So this idea that poverty is intertwined with wellness and health, and that health is kind of, there's a confluence of trauma, of lack, of these disparities in these other areas. If we were able to fix some of those, what they call social determinants of health, housing, transportation, food, education, those are all the things that actually impact the health and well-being of people. And so if we're able to improve those disparities, then we can increase the wellness and the well-being of our communities, an average of 8 years, if we were able to rise that. That's huge. So our RMAPI is really trying to attack poverty and improve the quality of life. You know, this idea that we're a collective impact is an approach that requires a coalition of the willing, and those that are really willing to attack policies, structures, systems, and behaviors. We need to talk to people and get new ideas, experiment and pilot with those concepts, and really learn from other cities who might have successes and failures, and kind of learn from them. And we're trying to engage authentically the community who knows what's going on and most likely knows what needs to happen, and really listen to them and have them help lead us in the direction that best suits our community. We need to look at, so we are trying to look at all these areas, but then prioritize based on where the community thinks we need to be working first. So we are looking at affordability of basic needs. How do we increase economic stability and close that wealth gap? How do we improve educational outcomes? How do we improve healthcare accessibility, affordability, and outcomes? How do we ensure safe, healthy, and thriving neighborhoods? How do we improve social connections and community connections? And then how do we address the injustices of the criminal justice system and try to decriminalize poverty? We know that poverty is not an easily solvable issue there's no silver bullet, right? There's nothing that we can do where we can just solve poverty by switching on or off something, but it is a combination of trying to address these factors systemically and at the root cause level that probably will give us our best way forward. So our RMAPI's focus areas currently are around economic stability and mobility. We are looking at employment, wages, pay, and social and safety net benefits. We are looking at policies like the decriminalization of poverty through the Less is More Act, which is parole reform. We are advocating for that. We were huge advocates for the Driven by Justice legislation, which was to eliminate the suspension of driver's licenses for non-payment of fees and fines. And that's been in place for about a month now. It was signed into law by the governor last December. It went effective, I think, in July. And we've seen 1.4 million people's driver's licenses be automatically reinstated. So that, you know, this is an opportunity for people who might have been disadvantaged because they didn't have a driver's license to get work, right? Just because they had some fees and fines that were on their records and they couldn't get their driver's licenses. So, you know, these are areas that we have kind of focused in on and trying and put some energy behind trying to get some things done. We're supporting policies around child tax credit, the Child Poverty Reduction Act, and we're also working really hard to try to see if we can get minimum wage increases into the legislature, into our laws for New York State, especially for upstate, because right now there's a difference in the minimum wage rate between downstate and upstate. So we're trying to increase upstate's minimum wage rate to $15 as well. We are just establishing a group to address housing in Rochester and Monroe County. Affordable housing, accessible housing, quality housing, home ownership. We need to figure out what we can do to increase home ownership. You saw those numbers. We know that that's a way to increase economic stability and potentially mobility and generate wealth for families. And so how do we do that in an area where people are saying there's not enough good housing, there's not enough affordable housing, and the housing stock quality is not accessible to me. And then the other thing that I talked about is trying to do all this by ensuring, though, that we have really solid community engagement. Like, what do we need to do to make sure that our community is always at the table, that the voices are always heard, and that they are leading the work that we're doing, because their priorities are the priorities that we should undertake. You know, which ones of these areas should we be focused on? So what are we, you know, specifically, what are we doing? We have, last year we had something we put out called an employee pledge. And this was in a pledge that where we encouraged employers in the region to sign a pledge saying that they would do 4 things around best practices. They would hire more Black and Brown employees, poor employees. They would retain them. They would promote them, and they would do more to recruit them. And so they identified best practice areas where they were strong, and one of those 4 areas where they wanted to work harder. And we have put some learning sessions in place this year so that they could understand what is going on and how they might improve their own practices. So we have had about 55 employers sign this pledge, and we are continuing to try to create changes in behaviors and practices amongst the employers in Monroe County. In February, we established a wildly important goal of raising the minimum starting wage to $15 for 10,000 workers in Rochester and Monroe County. I'm going to tell you a little bit about that in a second. I think I talked about some of those advocacy efforts that we have done where we've supported the child poverty legislation. We supported the Driven by Justice legislation. We've endorsed the Less is More parole reform legislation, and we are looking at the clean slate legislation, which we understand has changed quite substantially from the original bill that was written. And so our RMAPI is trying to figure out, you know, where do we stand? Because we like the language in the first clean slate legislation, not so crazy about what they're kind of rewriting it. So we're going to talk about that next week at our policy working group. And we're trying to expand our community engagement. We're trying to actually recruit a cohort of young adults, which I would call the opportunity youth, those who are kind of between the ages of 18 to 25. The idea is not necessarily to try to impact kind of what is going on in our community with young people now, but helping that group of young people design a community that they want to live in when they become adults. Like, what do they want? What do they want Rochester to look like when they become adults? And what do we need to do to create a community where young people want to stay and are vested in the community that they live in? So, you know, that's kind of longer term work, but we would love to kind of get a community of young adults to start having those conversations. So we talked about this wildly important goal. That is something that we've been really pushing on this year. And so we have identified 10,000 as our goal. We've had more than 20 local employers report that they're raising their minimum wages to $15. That includes both the University of Rochester and Rochester Regional, two of the top 3 employers in the community. We're going to host an event on this coming Thursday, September 2nd, to publicly announce the initiative and to recognize the organizations who've already made that progress. We're already, you know, publicly, I can't tell you that we're over 6,000 because we haven't, you know, we're still doing the math, but the math that my team is doing says that we're about 6,500 toward that 10,000, and we'd love to be at 10,000 by the end of the year. And we've also heard that in some cases, there's some concern about from those people who are getting higher wages. They're concerned about what the impacts might be to their benefits. And so we're trying to work to understand how do we help provide support and counsel to those individuals who might be getting a minimum wage increase and are really concerned about some of their benefits, losing some of their benefits. So we've kind of partnered with Law New York, and they're hosting some weekly virtual workshops and offering free one-on-one support to anybody who wants to know more about how the benefits might be affected with higher wages, because we think it's important to see both sides of that coin. So that's my pitch. And I have a bunch of questions, but maybe before we go to my questions, let me ask you, you know, what do you think? What did you hear? What did you like? What didn't you like?
I think it's great that that you and your team are working on this for the minorities. That's a really a great thing, and I'm glad to hear that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna kind of let other folks chime in so I don't hog the mic.
Well, if I might add anything, is that this youth focus, I think that, you know, succession and always looking to the future is important. And I'm glad that RMAPI, I'm glad that they're focused on, you know, our youth like that and where we're going down the line. I think so many people are focused on, you know, the right now that we missed the mark. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, I do like that. I'm just excited about because I didn't know much about MAPI. I didn't know much about it. So I'm very excited.
Well, I'm glad I could introduce it to you. And I hope that, you know, it piques your interest and keeps you engaged, and we would love to continue the dialogue.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Johnny, any thoughts? I know you're on the road, brother.
I have a question. Do you know what employers have increased their wages to 15? Is it a lot of local places, or is it? I mean, like I know I just seen a sign for Wendy's. They said that they've increased to $15. But is it mainly like the essential workers fields or the fast food restaurants, or are there other businesses that's involved?
Yeah, that's a great question, Erica. The organizations that we are asking organizations, companies, and agencies to kind of self-report. So we don't necessarily get the big nationals. Like I know Costco went to $15, and while they have a presence in Rochester, we don't have a kind of a local connection to them. But I know, and so they're not on our list because they haven't publicly come to us and said, hey, RMAPI, we're at $15, but we know they're at $15 because they say it. So most of the organizations that we're going to be reporting on are local organizations. The University of Rochester, their entire system, right, from their medical center all the way through their academics, they've gone to $15. Rochester Regional Health has gone to $15 as a minimum. Huther Doyle Catholic Charities, Food Link, I know I'm going to miss some, Heritage Christian Services, who am I going to miss? And they're going to be mad at me. So we're going to actually have this event on Thursday where we're going to acknowledge all of them, and you'll be able to go to our website. We're branding this Level Up Champions. There'll be a logo that if organizations are at $15 and they want to put this like Klingon sticker on their windows, or they want to put it on their websites, they'll be recognized as a Level Up Champion, which means that they're a minimum $15 minimum wage employer. So potential employees can look to see if they're showing that little logo, and they'll know that they're $15. And so we will, I said make that announcement on Thursday. But the organizations that we're talking about are local to Rochester, Monroe County.
Okay, one more question. Oh God, it just went away. Hold on.
I'll be here. Willie's not gonna let me go.
Is there some benefit to the employers that actually participate? Is there some type of tax breaks they get, or is just volunteer?
Yeah, this is strictly volunteer, because we know that most of them understand that sub $15 is not a livable wage. And quite frankly, most of them know that $15 is a journey on the step to a livable wage. So they know that in order to have a strong community, we need workers who are getting living wages so that they can afford basic needs and not endure some of the trauma and the stresses of, lower than living wages.
Yeah, I came in a little late because I was having difficulties logging in. But what is I'm not sure if you said it already or if I missed it, but what is the wage, the living wage that they say that's feasible for people to actually live comfortably?
Well, there's a huge debate there, Erica. So I would say that the federal poverty limit, which is what the federal guidelines are, say that the poverty limit threshold is a family of four that has an income less than $25,000 is poor.
Okay.
We know that is such a low bar, like nobody can live on, or it's really difficult to live for a family of four to live on $25,000 a year. Mm-hmm. In upstate New York, Monroe County, a family of four, you would hear that the number would be somewhere around $70,000 a year for a family of four to live fairly comfortably, which is probably closer to two working adults making at least $18 an hour. So if you had two adults working and two kids, and you were bringing in about $70,000, you might be able to afford most of your basic needs like housing, childcare, food, transportation, and you probably would still be, you know, scraping by, but you wouldn't be like, it wouldn't be
Poverty level.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Just for Johnny that's on the phone, I think if you hit *6, that will unmute your phone. There you go.
You got me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so at my driving school, I need a ton of people, and we're paying over minimum wage. But the only requirement is having a clean driver's license for 2 years. I've been putting ads out all over the place for the past 3 months. No one has a clean driver's license for 2 years at least.
What driving school is it, Johnny?
Well, we own both. We own ABC and Morgan now, so we pretty much got them all.
Okay, so
but
you
if you
look
apply
at,
through, you could apply through me at ABC, and I'll get you in like faster than you can imagine.
Got you. All right, we'll make sure.
That's why I'm in Buffalo. They had me in Buffalo doing road tests because we're so short staffed. If you have a clean license for 2 years, I'll hire you almost right now on the phone.
Clean license.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good,
Right
that's
now,
good
I'm
news.
So Johnny, do you know this this driven by justice legislation that was passed, and where they are cleaning up people's driver's licenses for, you know, the lack of fees and fines, you know, paying for not paying their fees or fines?
I know all about it. I've actually taken in, since the pandemic is so-called been over, in my in-person class, about 90 people who got their license restored. And we got a whole lot more coming in. So it's working out really well.
Okay. But if they've gotten their licenses restored, they still have to have them for 2 years before they can work for you.
Still got to have them for 2 years. Also, they don't just restore. You have to take you have to go do the whole process over, like the 5-hour class, the permit. So you got to do the whole thing over. But so many doors have been opened up and so many people have really got successful with it. But they're not going to just restore them. You have to take the road test and everything all over again.
Okay.
Which is still good because, you figure a lot of these people had $20,000 fines, you know what I mean, $10,000 fines, and they made that go away. So they were able to go in and do up a payment plan, $200 down, payment plan per month, and you get your privileges back, which is, I think that's a great thing because so many people have been driving around here like on nothing, just not even with IDs.
Yep.
As an example,
on a prayer.
Yeah. My 5-hour class on Saturday, a young lady drove in on her permit and they arrested her going on her lunch break to McDonald's, towed her car, brand new car. So wow. It's a beautiful thing, but people still aren't like when they say you got your privileges back, don't jump in the car and drive. Follow protocol and then drive. They're just like really making examples out of these people with learner's permits who own their own cars. They're in the database, so they know who you are and where you live. And so over the pandemic, we had, just in Monroe County, we had about 1,700 people arrested just on traffic infractions. It's crazy. It's crazy.
So let's transition a little bit here. Good information from all. Did you have some questions for us, Aqua?
Yes, I did. So I have a few questions for you. The first one is, what is the community's perception of RMAPI? And I think Wade started off with saying he didn't really have any perception because he really didn't know a lot about it. But if you do know more about RMAPI, what are your perceptions of RMAPI?
I think Wade sums it up a lot. His especially from our perspective of barbers, beauticians, and appearance enhancement industry. I have to be honest, I don't hear that conversation. Me myself personally, just because I'm close to it because of my political hat that I wear, and I knew the former executive director. I have a little more insight into RMAPI. But I knew that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have this conversation tonight, is I knew that a lot of my colleagues in the barber industry and appearance enhancement industry probably this may be their first time. They may have heard about it. They may have seen it on television, but really didn't know the extent. Like I know a lot of people, even myself, I thought it was a non-for-profit. So that was new information that you shared tonight when you said, hey, it's a collective of individuals, basically like-minded individuals. So it's not really, a non-for-profit or, government entity per se. So I think that may be a perception that may be out there, that it's another CBO, community-based organization, that provides services. And you said that tonight too. We don't really provide services.
Yeah, I think that it was a misperception. And, I understand why people believe that we are a CBO and believe that we're non-for-profit. We do, the backbone staff, there is a small backbone staff that kind of staffs the wider collective. But at the end of the day, we are really at the will of the stakeholders and the community to do the work that we do. And if we get engagement by stakeholders and community, then we can, and everybody's kind of aligned, we can do our work. If we aren't aligned, which, we're not always aligned. This is, I tell people we are herding a bunch of cats because everybody believes that they all have their individual ideas on how poverty should be solved. So, you get all those people into a room and, you got to really kind of facilitate really good conversation and prioritization on what do we go about working on. So, but I understand that, and we're hopefully going to get better by extending ourselves into the community. I just hired a new community engagement manager. His name is Clayton Waller, and Clayton is a resident of the 19th Ward, born and raised in Rochester, urban suburban kid, really engaged. He's a delegate in the 19th Ward, and so he is going to help us continue to extend RMAPI's footprint and continue to try to build authentic engagement with the community so that the community feels like the work that we're doing represents the priorities of the community. And I think that's maybe what's has been missing, Willie, is that ongoing, continuous engagement with the community on the work and the priorities of what we're doing. So I am thankful to Erica and Johnny and Wade tonight for the discussion, and hope that we can, maybe extend this on, because we do try to make sure that as we look at things like policies, like the Driven for Justice legislation or the Child Poverty Reduction Act, before RMAPI gets behind it, or when we're trying to figure out, what do we do to advocate forward, we want to make sure that our advocacy and our talking points are informed and led by what the community wants. We sent an advocacy letter to the governor and to a lot of our legislators regarding the cannabis legislation. And while we weren't advocating one way or another for whether marijuana should be legalized, what we were really clear on was, if marijuana was going to be legalized, that the revenues from the marijuana, the revenues that came from that, needed to repair the harm that was done by a community that was ravaged by the criminal justice system when marijuana was illegal. And that we needed to really make sure that licenses for legal cannabis enterprises were extended to community members, that our community, especially our Black and Brown communities, the communities that have extreme poverty in Rochester, were repaired as marijuana was legalized. So we were very clear about that.
You bring up a very a topic that I'm doing a lot of research on right now. We just had an extensive briefing with council, with folks that came from areas of the country where they have dispensaries, and where it's legal and has been, I think it's Colorado, has been legal for a while. And, it's some of the data is pointing towards that a lot of this marijuana legalization in these dispensaries are often having unintended consequences around gentrification and increasing the amount of property values in areas and pushing people out of the communities. And I know that we have dispensaries here that people don't even know about, that I know individuals who work there and they're making less than $15 an hour. And so when we look at the potential, we hear people say, oh, it's jobs, it's jobs, it's jobs. Yeah, but what jobs are there? And what is the unintended consequences of this that it's having in communities that we're seeing in other parts of the country? And these communities, and then, people say, well, it's also economic entrepreneur opportunity. But when you think about that and you look at how much it costs to get in this business, the guy that's selling on the corner is not really going to be able to afford hundreds of thousands of dollars to enter into the business of marijuana production because of how much it costs on the top end, and being able to get a loan and being able to open up. So, there's a lot of questions I have around that.
Yep.
And of course, I'm not trying to answer them all tonight, but I just wanted to thank you for bringing that to the space, because I do think that's something we're going to have to be paying very, very close attention to in New York State, and making sure that we don't just add to the further. You spoke of something when you talk about healthy, and I like the fact that you use that term of being economically healthy, being educationally healthy and socially healthy, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm always saying people that I'm looking for people to be whole, right? We want to make people whole and healthy holistically. And what we've seen in our community, when you see the staggering numbers, we're in a housing market with the pandemic. There's been a stop on evictions. We're heading for this moratorium ending. We're seeing an increase in our community. Property values have gone up significantly in Rochester. The housing market in Rochester is booming right now. People are, I live in the 19th ward. I'm constantly receiving letters to buy my home, to buy my house, from individuals. And, we're seeing, and I'm just very afraid of our community becoming, the predominantly. Yeah, I'm just, all of the essence of it is there for you see, that we're heading in that direction.
And so we've got to be really thoughtful, right? I mean, because you're exactly right. The cannabis legislation can be a huge economic boon for some, but only if we are very clear about making sure that there is preference and reparations in a way given, so that those who have been marginalized and excluded or criminalized for that same behavior, or for the are actually prioritized in how we go forward. And so we got to figure out how to make that work, Willie, because if we don't think through it, it'll just happen. Like, I heard that there were people that were already buying warehouse spaces in the city because they knew that they would be great places either for dispensaries, for growing labs, for all these things. Like, there was like this huge push on real estate. So I agree. We've got to be really questioning what is going on.
And I guarantee you, Aqua, they're not black and brown people.
I guarantee you they're not either. And that's why, when New York State starts handing out these licenses, we need to put a check on that. That's why we need to have our state delegation be really looking at what does that legislation look like, and how is it going to be administered? How are these programs going to be administered? We need to make sure that there is inclusivity, representation in this, because this could be a lot of money for some people. If we're not careful, it won't be the people that we know it should go to.
I agree. I'm looking at your questions, looking at what areas should RMAPI prioritize. And I don't know if this fits in the space, or I'm sure that people that sit at your table that are having these types of conversations. I saw it in one of your slides. You referenced poverty and then trauma. It was like right there. And so, that word to me is said a lot, but really not giving the attention it deserves. When you think of institutional structural racism, and when you think of that, what the impact that has on the community, psychologically, socially, and the trauma associated with that. I would say I would like to see RMAPI maybe not leading those conversations, but helping to foster those conversations and places that that those conversations could be had in trusting, safe places. I think are the barbershops, the salons, the appearance enhancement industry, where, you know, as we're having these conversations now, these vaccination conversations now, we're having, you know, very tough questions, or we're starting to have conversations around cancer. Our U.P.B.C.A has been working with the Wilmot Cancer Center. Our last shop talk was about colorectal cancer screening, because a lot of Black and brown people, we talk about the healthcare disparities and poverty. I saw on a slide where if you're living in poverty, you're more likely to die faster, or 8 years faster than others. And so, you know, these are some of the things. All of that has a traumatic impact on the community and the families that are living in and affected by the poverty that they're living in day to day. And so I wonder, you know, we talk about it, we mention the word, but what are we actually doing around addressing the traumatic impacts into mental health and the psychological impacts that all of this has when you can't find a job, when you can't get the proper pay that your counterparts may be receiving, when your house is worth less than someone else you know house who lives 15 minutes from you. When, you know, these things, you know, when you look at these numbers and when you see these staggering, that has an impact on people, you know, and it causes people to lose hope. And to, you know, when they hear this data, and when they see this data, it's very staggering for some individuals who may not be tuned into it. So I think there's opportunity to be in that space to help people navigate through all of that. Because at the end of the day, you know, if we don't start having these tough conversations first with each other, because there's different conversations that need to be happening in different groups, and then, as you say, like with employers, and then with individuals who are working in the spaces of the banks, et cetera, the housing industry, different industries that are impacting all of these variables that you have presented to us tonight. So I think that working on that with trauma and associating that and tying that all into all of the underlying issues that you presented with us tonight is an area of priority, and utilizing, you know, who should our RMAPI partner with in the community, utilizing the barbershops, the salons, the appearance enhancement industry, I think would be very beneficial to helping RMAPI aligning and connecting and getting good, authentic community voices.
I love this, Willie. And Erica, I see your hand. But I love this because I think I am going to ask Clayton to contact you and Wade to see if we can kind of formalize a way to connect to this community. Because let me just tell you something. First of all, my hairdresser was probably one of the smartest women I knew. She had the most sense of anybody that I knew. And if I ever had any issues, whether it was trying to get information, trying to find something, or trying to, you know, work on my own personal relationships, she always knew the right answer. So I agree with you that this is where the stories are. This is where the community is, right? This is where we go when we need a safe space, where we need like our community to uplift us, where we, you know, get like a little bit of like confidence reboosted, and sometimes truth telling, like, you know, they tell you like it is. So I think that we absolutely need to go back to our barbers and cosmetologists and appearance enhancement industry professionals and the networks that you guys built, because people trust you, right? They trust you. And I think you said something the other day, which was so clear, which was you're like, people keep their barbers and their hairdressers and their doctors and their, what was the third one? Their spiritual leaders, advisors, yeah. Right? Those are the places that you always go. And I think you are 100% right. So I would love to be able to continue this dialogue, even if it's maybe not in this format, whatever way works for you, how do we connect to you and the community? Because I always know when I always wanted to know what was going on in the community, if I went to my hairdresser, she always knew. She always knew what the news was, where the issues were, what really happened, different than what was on the news. She knew the real story of what happened.
Get the tea, right? You could get the tea.
Always got the tea.
Erica is gonna, after her, we're gonna start closing up.
Okay.
Go ahead, Erica.
Oh yeah, like you were saying in your presentation that the trauma and the mental health are tied with each other. What I've noticed from doing research myself, also being a student, and learning things while I'm learning my craft, what I've learned is that a lot of youth, a lot of African American men and women, a lot of them are in prison due to traumas that's been untreated. And basically, we need to know is like these traumas could have happened when they were young, when they were children, and no one addressed them. They saw them as being bad, or they saw them as being, just there's no hope for them. But when there was definitely an underlying mental issue going on. There was some type of abuse, some type of mental sexual abuse that went on, and and that's what I think is triggering a lot of our Black and brown people, because we've been taught to shut up, keep our business within the home, and also they don't want to put their kids on medication. And another thing is that it's just that they're embarrassed and they don't want to tell what happened, and they're carrying this burden, and then it can turn to a big monster. So what else are you your organization is doing to start from the root, from the weed, when they were young, when you see these issues in school and elementary, instead of brushing it off and saying they're bad and suspending them and kicking them out of school, is there a way that the program is going to try and get to the root of the problem with the youth, because the youth have to grow to be adults?
Yeah. I think you're exactly right, Erica. I think that, what we know is that there are a lot of these traumas that are inflicted very young, and they continue into adulthood and into future generations. Like it sits in your body forever. And you pass it on. You pass those traumas on, and you also pass your behaviors on. Exactly. So I think that we as a community need to figure out multiple ways to address it. And part of it is just making sure that, people understand what the cost of trauma is in a community. And how do we start to get at it very early? I think you'll see that in some schools, they talk about focusing on the social emotional health of students, not just their academic health, but, how do kids show up? What's kind of going on behind, underneath in the family, when they show up at school and they may have an issue, how do they help them kind of resolve it? How do they help them to kind of manage their own emotions and manage their own behaviors? Like they're trying to teach young children how to do that as students, so that they know how to deal with anger and frustration and all these things as they grow up. I think we have to continue to do that, and we have to help parents understand that these are real skills that a lot of us probably haven't really learned so much. And now there's a way to kind of address that. I don't have all the answers, but I think you're 100% right.
All right, we want to wrapping up at 7 o'clock. Aqua, is there a way that employers or the community how do they contact you if they want to get involved with RMAPI?
You can email me at aqua.porter@RMAPINY. I will put it in the chat for you. I look forward to the conversation. RMAPINY.org. You can also, we have an endingpovertynow.org website that will take you right to our website. You will be able to you can get more information there. We are housed at United Way on College Ave. So if you call United Way and ask for RMAPI, they will connect you to us as well. And hopefully we have a Facebook page, we have a Instagram page, and you can find us on LinkedIn as well. So all those ways to connect with us are available.
Wonderful. All right. Well, we want to thank our guest, Aqua. We thank, of course, our Vice President, Erica and Johnny, for joining us this evening. We hope that this shop talk with U.P.B.C.A. has been beneficial for all of our viewers and those who will be listening to this. We will definitely be sharing it to all of our social medias. We have a lot of work to do in our community. It's going to take everybody. I can tell you, Aqua, as from speaking on behalf of U.P.B.C.A., we're excited to be able to partner with you to figure out what that could look like and how can we continue to help to raise the awareness, because the awareness is, acknowledgement is the first step, right, to getting to true healing. You have to have some acknowledgement and then atonement. And so we're committed to that, and we believe that, we know that our customers will be committed to joining in, having these conversations, and working on solutions that we can get to a better place in our community. So we want to thank you, Aqua. Thank you for being with us. We thank everyone for listening. God bless you. And as we say, love, peace, and hair grease.
All right. Yes.
Good night, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much.
Be well.
Bye-bye.